Good morning and welcome to PS 81. My name is Cesar Martinez and I'm a 4th grader. I love to play soccer. It's my favorite sport and it makes me a better student. My schoolyard can be hard to play in. There isn't a lot of space and the ground is rough. I'm very excited to have a gym where we can all play together. I will be able to practice soccer and play with friends. Also, here at this school, our classrooms get very hot. It's hard to concentrate and have to get up a lot to get water. I'm very excited to have air conditioning next school year in all our classes. This school just is getting better. Now I'd like to introduce Mayor Bill de Blasio.
Give Cesar another round of applause. Excellent, excellent. All right. Martinez.
Maritnez.
I want to first of all say, Cesar, that was amazing. You did a really good job, and you just explained the whole reason we're here today. So, Cesar, you show what a great school this is and why our kids deserve air conditioning and deserve gym space that they can actually play in the right way. And I think we're also going to hear from Shamika. Is that right? You're going to join us? And please introduce yourself to everyone so they know what you do.
Good morning and welcome to PS 81. My name is Shamika Martier. I'm the treasurer of the PTA, the parent of a 1st grader and a 5th grader here at PS 81. I love this school. It has been an amazing experience for myself as well as both of my boys. The teachers and the principal here are so supportive. They always go the extra mile and lend a hand out to the students whenever needed. I can't tell you how much it means to us to finally get a new playground and air conditionings in the classroom. Both my boys love sports and they love to be active, but they don't have the space that they need. Now they will, and I'm sure all the parents would agree with me that this is a big step in the right direction. I also know during the summer months of June and September, this building can be a very difficult place to spend the day. It's an old building, it gets very hot and very uncomfortable for the children. As a matter of fact, the children have a hard time concentrating. They also take turns sharing the classroom, which might already have air conditionings. A new playground and air conditionings will make this not only a better building, but it will help in the education of our children. Thank you, Mayor de Blasio and Chancellor Fariña. Thank you.
Shamika, thank you so much. You said it all. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your leadership on the PTA as well and helping all parents get their voices heard. Let's thank Shamika again, everyone. I just want to say up front a thank you to members of the administration who are a key part of making these changes here in our schools. I want to thank the President and CEO of the School Construction Authority, Lorraine Grillo. Let's give her a round of applause. And the Deputy Chancellor for Operations, Elizabeth Rose. Let's give her a round of applause. And a thank you to all the leadership of this school, all the parents, all the teachers who are here. A special thank you to the principal, Romy Diamond. Thank you so much. So, as I look at these young people, I am reminded of why we came up with these initiatives. And for me, it's very personal. I saw my own children go to school and have to focus during the school day. And I knew that they needed enough to eat. I knew they needed enough physical activity. I knew they needed the right temperature if they were going to be the best they could be. I saw it with Chiara and I saw it with Dante growing up. The days When things were too hot, they couldn't focus as well. Any day they didn't get physical activity, you could tell what it did to their concentration. Kids need phys ed for their bodies, but they also need it for their minds. They need it for their ability to be calm and to focus and to learn. So my own personal experience convinced me that our school system was missing the boat for so many kids and leaving way too many kids behind. And it had been that way for a long, long time, and it had to change. We finally got to the point where we could make the big changes necessary. And that's what you see right here at PS 81. Now, let's be clear. There was a status quo in the city for a long time, for decades and decades, where some schools had air conditioning, other schools didn't. Some schools had gyms, other schools didn't. I've talked about before the idea that in this city it was a known fact that there were quote-unquote good schools and quote-unquote bad schools, which never was acceptable to begin with. That was a level of inequality that made no sense for the greatest city on earth. But it was tolerated for decades and decades. We have to step-by-step change all that. And this is an example right here at PS 81. This school deserved better. This school deserved a good learning environment, but it didn't get it. And these kids were being cheated. But now, this generation will experience something different. They'll experience the fairness that all the kids before them deserved. And it's going to happen all over the city. So our job is to right the wrongs of the past and create real fairness across the school system. You heard previously when we did the executive budget that we're putting air conditioning in every classroom in New York City schools by 2022. Every single classroom, every place where kids are learning, there will be air conditioning. And that was a worthy expenditure because it's going to be good for all our children, but also good for our hardworking teachers and staff and everyone who's a part of the building to be able to work in a better environment. We now have taken another very big step with the budget that was agreed upon Friday night. And now we will finally have universal physical education in New York City. Universal. And I want to emphasize, it will make kids better students. It just will. Ask any parent here, ask any teacher here. This will make kids into better students. It's also something we owe them in terms of their health and well-being, not just while they're children, but it's going to teach them the habits they need for the rest of their lives. If you're exposed to physical activity when you're young, there's a good chance you stick with it. If you don't get that, there's a good chance you never do. So we're going to set up these kids for a lifetime of staying healthy and staying active. And that's going to happen all over New York City. So these are not just investments in buildings. These are investments in our children and our children's future. Now, we're focusing right away on the schools that have literally no phys ed capacity in any way we would think of it traditionally, meaning a real gym. What you saw upstairs, and I want to give a lot of credit to the teachers and parents here at PS 81. That room upstairs, that's not a gymnasium. That's a really small auditorium that they're doing their damnedest to turn into a gymnasium because that's all they got. And I give real credit for creativity to the teachers trying to give the kids a chance to get some movement, some activity, some chance to learn sports, but you saw how contained that space is. Kids couldn't really run around. It's not going to serve what they need. That's not a real gym. But that's all these kids got. So we're going to fix that, and we're fixing it because it's the right thing to do. But I want to note also, this is the law governing our school system. It's state law that has been systematically ignored since it was passed in 1957. Now, I want to put that in perspective. 1957 was 8 mayors ago. Robert Wagner was the mayor of New York City when the law was passed at the state level mandating phys ed for every child. And it got ignored. Generation after generation, it got ignored. And that's not acceptable. We had to break that pattern of the past. We know it was unfair to our children. We know they were being cheated because they didn't have phys ed. I will note, it's not surprising that most of that time that passed since 1957, big issues like this didn't get addressed. Phys ed wasn't addressed. Cultural programming in schools wasn't addressed. Early childhood education wasn't addressed. All sorts of things we needed weren't addressed. And that was directly connected to the fact we didn't have mayoral control of education. Because a whole lot of things that would have taken a whole lot of work, a whole lot of will, a whole lot of focus just didn't happen. Because we had a governance system for our schools that kept the status quo in place instead of changing things. A lot has changed in just the few short years since mayoral control of education came in place. And here's an example. Every school will have air conditioning. Every school will have a real phys ed facility. Those are big changes for our kids, and they're part of a lot of other big changes that are underway. Now, to give you a sense of the numbers, again, we have 76 schools that have essentially no serious gym space right now, and then another 120 that need a big upgrade. So almost 200 schools in this city that do not have adequate physical education facilities. 200 schools, that's bigger than the school systems of all but the largest cities in the entire country. That's how much we have to change. Here's the pledge I am making to you, and it is part of the budget that we will pass this week. My pledge is that by September 2021, every single school in New York City will have a modern, full phys ed capacity for our children. And we are creating a curriculum that actually brings the modern approach to health and well-being into how we teach phys ed. I remember phys ed back in my day. I imagine some of you remember as well. It was not the most engaging subject. You climbed up a rope or something like that, and you waited a long time to climb up a rope. This concept is not just to give the physical space, but to update the entire curriculum. So it's a constant focus on health and well-being and movement and activity so kids can really, really benefit. So schools like this will be in the first rung to benefit. In PS 81, and this is a news flash, I can tell, for some members of the school community, we will be breaking ground next year on a new gymnasium for this school. And this will be a great example of this new initiative. This school is going to have a state-of-the-art gymnasium, not a small auditorium where people are crowded in trying to get a little space to run, an actual gymnasium for these kids. And it's going to make a huge difference. And you heard from Shamika about what the lack of air conditioning has meant. So we're going to start to solve the air conditioning problem here at PSA1, and we're not going to solve it next year. We're actually going to start solving it tomorrow. Air conditioners are going to start to come in tomorrow. Only 11 of the 48 classrooms in this building have air conditioning, and we're going to start fixing that tomorrow. So it's going to make a big difference. So look, I'll finish with this. The idea is we can't leave the status quo of education in this city the way it was. It wasn't working. And that meant everything from the curriculum to how we trained and supported our professionals to the physical reality of our school system. It all had to change. You're going to hear from Chancellor Fariña in a moment. I want to give her a lot of credit for leading the way on so many of these initiatives because she understands what was missing and what had to be changed in these schools. So we're going to get it right. Where there wasn't early childhood education, now there will be. We have pre-K for all. We will have 3K for all as well. That's going to change the lives of kids right there to start early. Where there wasn't air conditioning, now there will be. Where there wasn't after-school programs, there are now for our middle school kids. Where there wasn't phys ed, there will be now. One step after another, we're changing the reality of schools. We are turning the tables on decades of disinvestment in our children and decades of inequality. And when we say equity and excellence, we mean it. We are literally taking the simplest phrase and following it through. If one school has something, the other one doesn't, we want to figure out how to even up the score. And that's what we're doing here today at PS 81. A few words in Spanish. Estamos anunciando que cada escuela tendrá un espacio para educación física antes del año 2022. Nuestra meta es que miles de estudiantes se mantengan sanos y activos para que puedan triunfar en sus escuelas. Es parte de nuestro plan para cada estudiante tenga un ambiente cómodo y seguro para aprender. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the woman who is leading the charge when it comes to equity and excellence and helping us to make the school system better every day for these young people, our Chancellor, Carmen Fariña.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be in this school that actually your superintendent calls the happiest school in District 24. Are you the happiest school in District 24, guys? Yes. La escuela más feliz? Very good. And I like to kind of put this in a very practical sense. First and foremost, every principal dreads rainy weather, correct? And you dread rainy weather even more if you have a multi-purpose room and you don't have separate rooms, gyms, and auditoriums where you can actually put students in a much better environment as you figure out how to do the activities in your school. So having a dedicated gym and a dedicated auditorium is crucial to be able to have a full life of a school. You shouldn't have to transfer from an auditorium to a gym and back to on a regular basis. So that doesn't work. So having your own gym is very important. The other thing, we started this initiative almost a year and a half ago with PE Works, which is doing an assessment of all our schools and what is in a school. Because to have a gym without a highly licensed PE teacher is only half the job. So one of the things we've been doing is making sure that the universities know that we're going to need more licensed PE teachers so that the kind of activities you have are not the ones I had to have when I was a kid. I mean, if I did the squats and the up and down one more time, I think that wasn't really phys ed. So it's really important that we have teachers who are going to be trained to do all kinds of exciting things with you. Last year, we started on Mondays having all the phys ed teachers trained at the borough offices to go back and share with each other, because we know that phys ed teachers are just as important as math teachers and social studies teachers. So having them well trained to go back to their schools, I think was very, very important. And we've already started to see that. Also, in today, if you look at the health issues in this country, obesity, diabetes, you can go through, heart conditions. If we don't start having kids used to physical education when they're young and make it part of their environments and part of who they are, then we're not really doing right by them. And something that occurred to me last year that is part of our equity initiative also, if you're looking at certain parts of the city or certain types of schools, sports giving advantage for college scholarships. And I have become very focused on which of the scholarships for universities that are left wanting, and believe it or not, there are things like lacrosse, golf. I am looking to see which of the courses that we can put into our schools. I actually went to Governor's Island to see what we can do there. The reality is that's part of equity also. Do our students also know how to develop skills that will help them with their leisure life? When you come to a weekend, you shouldn't be sitting there in the morning and say, what am I going to do today? If you have a sport you love, some of the children were telling me they love to play soccer. Big soccer game this weekend. My husband was actually rooting for the team that won. We won't tell you which one it was, but it was. But that's partially how you spend your leisure time, how you do activities outside of your home. So to me, this is really, really important. And I think it's also important that students understand that by jogging, move así, todos, muévate así un poquito, todos, así. Move like this, everybody, move a little bit. Adults, move a little bit. Come on, move a little bit. This means, no, your brain gets refocused. If you have to sit too long in one position and you don't get to move, you tend to stop thinking. So this is going to fill a lot of needs for us. We're very, very excited about this. And having a schoolyard that allows you to play a soccer game that's a real soccer game is much better than a make-believe soccer game where you have a much smaller space. So congratulations to everybody.
We are doing all this improvement to the schools and phys ed and air conditioning with the great partnership of the City Council. We had a fantastic budget process. the earliest in 25 years and a very cooperative one. And this is the kind of everyday reality in our city the City Council has been focused on addressing. So I want to introduce the gentleman who represents this district, Councilmember Antonio Reynoso.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to say, with the budget process, it's just a breath of fresh air where we're not talking about the things that should be taken care of and talking about doing more, especially when it comes to initiatives like this, where we get physical education for all and, of course, air conditioners in every classroom. So thank you, Mayor, for that process and making it as rewarding as possible for the residents of Ridgewood and my district and, of course, the city of New York. And I just want to, en español, primero quiero decir hola a todos los niños que están presentes delante de nosotros. Y hola. Y que en este momento lo que estamos haciendo es trayendo igualdad a nuestras comunidades, viendo los espacios físicos y asegurando que los niños tengan toda la posibilidad para seguir progresando en su carrera. Y es un orgullo poder estar parado aquí, al lado del alcalde, en el trabajo que está haciendo para asegurar eso para cada niño de nuestra comunidad. Es otra vez un orgullo de poder estar aquí representando a este distrito de Ridgewood, pero más que todo a darle la oportunidad a estos niños de continuar a progresar en su físico y su mental y su academia por el trabajo que ha hecho nuestro alcalde. Pues thank you very much and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Now I want to bring up a proud graduate of PS 39, which is right down the street from my house in Brooklyn and is one of the oldest and smallest and most cramped schools in all of New York City.
They named a room after me.
Congratulations. But a great example of why kids need more phys ed is that school. So proud graduate and now our public advocate, Tish James.
So, Mr. Mayor, before I begin my remarks, universal pre-K, 3K, air conditioning, physical education, after schools, but you neglected to mention school lunch for everyone. Woo! Yay! And I think they're hungry, so I'll be brief. So, good morning, PS 81. Good morning, children. Hola, ¿cómo está? Hey. Hey. It's sweet. Morning. I want to thank the mayor. I want to thank the chancellor. I want to thank Councilmember Reynoso, Assemblymember Cathy, Nolan, Lorraine Grillo, Ernie Logan, Principal Diamond, and to all of my friends here. I want to thank the mayor for bringing us together for this health and wellness initiative. And it's so critically important that we talk about air conditioning. As you know, I've been talking a long time about asthma, and it's so critically important that we have air conditioning in all of the rooms, in all of the classrooms, so that our children can breathe and they can live. We've lost too many children as a result of their condition, of that condition. And I do know that in this national debate about education reform, not much has been said about the need for physical education. We all know that physical education is essential to a child's overall development and improve health outcomes. Physical education greatly reduces stress and child obesity. And too many children, we all know, and adults, we lead very sedentary lifestyles. And regular physical activity is vital to maintaining good health and improves a student's ability to focus, learn, and excel. And so we really need to unplug our children, and adults need to unplug from the technology, and we all need to move. But for too long, many of our schools have been without the critical health and wellness resources needed to achieve this objective. As the mayor mentioned, some over 200 New York City schools currently lack a designated gym or adequate space for physical education. Instead, these students are forced to have physical ed in small classrooms, the lunchroom, or not have it at all. By implementing universal physical education, we are making a strong commitment to our students and our schools to improve them with the designated physical education spaces they need and deserve. Our children are our most prized possessions, and we must do everything in our power to provide them with the tools they need to learn and succeed. And today, thanks to the mayor and to Chancellor Fariña, they will have regular exercise, helping to establish healthy habits as they grow older, and that will last a lifetime. And in the words of the former First Lady, Michelle Obama, students, let's move. Yay!
That was inspiring. I thank you. And lastly, man who was a teacher, was a principal. Oh, I'm sorry, Cathy first. My apology. I was not lastly. Let me get my order right, Cathy. There you go. Let me reset and talk about Albany for a second as I bring up Cathy Nolan. We constantly work to achieve these changes. We have had tremendous support from the chair of the Education Committee. As we've gone through some of the biggest changes we've made in the school system, and Cathy, I want to thank you particularly for your efforts on pre-K, because that was one of the biggest and boldest of the things we had to do. That happened because we had support in the legislature to make it happen, and we're certainly going to be coming back to you as we develop 3K as well. But Cathy, thank you. I know how much you love this school and this neighborhood, but I want to thank you because you really stood up for all the school children of New York City, and a lot of what we've done has been because of the legislature, specifically the Assembly, but even more specifically because you've been the education chair. So, Chair of the Education Committee in the Assembly, Cathy Nolan.
I want to thank Mayor de Blasio. I want to thank Chancellor Fariña. I want to thank my good friend Ernie Logan. I want to thank Lorraine Grillo from School Construction, and of course our wonderful principal, Ms. Diamond, our custodial engineer, our parents, our teachers. And just to give people a context, I'm 59 years old. This was my zoned elementary school. My mother did not send me here because in 1964 it was overcrowded and old, and I went to a local parochial school. But I didn't have gym there either. So I'm definitely one of the people. I never had a gym class. My high school had 6,000 students. We had no gym at Grover Cleveland when I attended there, unless you really pushed for it. All those things violated 100 different laws. It actually even goes back to 1947. There was an earlier law. So when I ran for the Assembly in the 80s, I made a commitment to try to help this school. And even then, at one point it had 1,700 children. And the community school district model did not work for PS 81. It is one of the reasons I voted for mayoral control 10 years later, because it was Brooklyn is across the street. So we were right on the edge of District 24. So 81 could never get its fair share in the competition among the community school district schools. This library is a direct result of mayoral control. The school had even less. And we brought Chancellor Walcott here when Mayor Bloomberg, and it was appalling, actually, the condition. There was no library. So I feel very good about that. And I share that with everyone so that people can understand that mayoral control, no system is perfect, but it allows the city to use need-based criteria in a way that the community school district model, for whatever reason, did not do. We have spent, since I became chair of the Education Committee, we have worked, obviously, to have improvements here. You'll see those awful trailers in the back. I have a high school, I only live a few blocks from here. I have a high school classmate that taught her entire career, Margaret Romolo. Many of you know she just retired. Her whole career was in that trailer. She retired. I couldn't get it done in time for Margaret. So I want to thank Mayor de Blasio. I want people to understand what this really means. We put $700 million of state money to removing those trailers, and Lorraine, we are going to get that money from Smart Schools Bond Act. And I want to thank Chancellor Fariña, because when I discussed the lack of air conditioning at a school in a part of the city with a high asthma ratio, she jumped, as she always does, into practical solutions, keeping the focus. And I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to say very honestly, I never was athletic. I'm an example, I think, of some of the problems. I envy you guys to have that. Girls did not have that in this neighborhood when I was a kid. And it's very, very important. So I feel tremendous sense of satisfaction. We've had a number of things in the budget to have studies on the lack of gyms and things in our school system, to the Deputy Chancellor, to all the others. We had a wonderful day here with the custodians for the holidays. This is a school that needs a lot of attention and deserves it. And now we have a principal that's taking us to that level. Ernie, she's a doll. You know that. A gem. A gem. But I want to thank everybody from the bottom of my heart. I look at these wonderful youngsters, and I know they're going to have a better future than I had in 1964 when there were 1,700 kids here in the 80s and no gym. So it makes a big difference. It's a smaller school now. It's a better school. And we can pay the kind of attention that we need to our children. Thank you, Mayor de Blasio. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now he's seen it all in our school system from the front line. And Ernie Logan understands what the real impact on kids is of not having the kind of facilities they deserve. So he has been pushing me for a long time to make these kind of changes, and I'm proud to say we've finally gotten there. Ernie Logan, President of CSA.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is about the promise. Many of you know that the mayor and I have this up and down battle of love and less love. And part of the less love comes about because I don't think sometimes that he moves fast enough for me. It is always about the children. It's always about the children. It's not about the adults. It's about the children. And I constantly tell him that. I'm the pragmatic union leader. I believe it's about the children. When our children do well, the adults will be fine. And we've been talking about this list of the things that need to be done. We got to feed children. We got to provide them safe places. We need to clean up this idea that we have kids in trailers. My God, we don't allow people to live in some of these places that we were educating our children in. Cathy Nolan met me some years ago and started talking about these, what we call TPUs. I didn't even know what it was. And I started visiting them and realized that they were temporary units that were here forever. Because why? We allowed it to happen. And when the mayor came in and I said to him, look, it's mayoral control. You can make this happen. You can make the bold moves. And whether it was U-Pre-K, I kept fighting about U-Pre-K. And I said, you know what? Do 4-year-olds, but we really need to do 3s. Comes back this year, he says we're going to do 3. I kept saying we need to have lunch for everyone. Why are we fighting about who we should feed and who we shouldn't feed? Everybody's hungry. Finally convinced him, let's do this lunch. He's keeping the promise. And you know what, Cathy, I got to say this to you. You're absolutely right. We could not do this if it had not been for mayoral control. Yeah, it needs some tweaks. It needs some work. But I was a product as a supervisor under community control. And I realized about when I was getting along with the board, the school board, how much pressure they put on the superintendent to help me when I disagreed with them, how much pressure they put on the superintendent not to help me. We need to be able to look at this at what's best for children, regardless of the local politics of elected officials. Let's look at what's important for children, all the children. So I need to commend the mayor for this. He knows, you know, we have this thing. I happen to love what he's been able to do. He didn't do it as fast as I wanted it done. But in the first 4 years, yes, you've gotten it done. And I commend you for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Tough love. Thank you very much, Ernie. All right, everyone, we're going to take questions from the media now. I think our young people are going to get a chance to go someplace more fun now.
Everybody else is in line.
Ernie, come back right here. There you go.
Thank you. That would be better than my dopey camera. Thank you. Thank you. See if it works. Thank you so much. That's very nice of you. Thank you. Thank you again. That's true, you know. I never had a gym class. Okay, you know, struggling, it's really, you know. But this was also school. It was so overcrowded. My mother said to my father, well, you have to pay for Berkeley School, which means I had no gym either. It was a little smaller. Also an ancient building.
No, it's an important point. So, as we go to questions, I want to say to our friends in the media that the children very much want to be on TV tonight. So please, all the camera guys, get some of the footage of them in there. Okay, we're going to take questions about this announcement and education issues, and then we'll go to others. Juliet.
Yes. You were talking about facilities. Does every school, will they get an actual gym or, something reasonably close to?
So I can give you, first of all, a layman's definition. What you saw upstairs was not a gym. Okay, that was makeshift. It would be polite to call it makeshift, but that's what they had, and they did the best they could with what they had. Now we're talking an actual gym with actual space to move around. And Lorraine Grillo and Elizabeth Rose are leading the charge. I want them both to come up, and they can give you a little bit more of the flavor of it. But it's going to be, in some cases, we're going to build a gym in a schoolyard or nearby. In some cases, there may be another facility, like in my neighborhood. PS 107 is about a block away from the Park Slope Armory, so they go that block to be able to take advantage of that. But we're not going to have a situation like this where there's no real gym available.
They have a very big, this school has a very big schoolyard with 3 trailers on it now. If the trailers come down, they can build a gym. And it'll make such a difference, Then I can retire.
Yeah. So first, we're working very closely with the School Construction Authority to assess all of the buildings that have outdoor yards and have the potential for an addition, a standalone gym, an addition with capacity, something like that. We will also be working very closely with local community-based organizations, YMCAs, and so forth to see if there is gym space nearby schools that we can lease. So having an actual gym is the preference. And when we get through that, we may end up with a few schools where we have a greater challenge, and we will do our best to find an appropriate solution for them.
Talk about what you're building.
Here? Okay.
Well, first of all, we have, as the Assembly member mentioned, trailers in the backyard. They are going to come down, and they'll begin to come down this fall. And then we will build a standalone gymnasium, full gymnasium for this school.
Mayor de Blasio, and I guess also for School Construction Authority and the DOE, you mentioned the challenges. We're in District 24, which along with District 30 are 2 of the most overcrowded in the city. Classrooms are overcrowded with students. There's still trailers getting put up. What will you do to address that challenge where, if you move the trailers or you're going to build a new school, is it going to kind of be playing catch up to make the gym space?
You mean the overcrowding issue in general?
Well, how are you going to make room for a gym or
while you're dealing with these other issues? I know. I want to let Cathy go first.
We built 2 schools. Thanks to mayoral control, we built 2 schools in District 24 in this part that have taken some of the pressure off here. One is the Geraldine Ferraro School on Metropolitan Avenue, and the other one is my former parochial school, which was torn down, apparently filled with asbestos. And I forget the number, 239 or 294, and someone will tell. What's the name of that school now? Learners and Leaders. 305. So we have 2 new the first 2 buildings built in Ridgewood in over 80 years. Were built in the last 8 years, 10 years. So we've taken some of the pressure off here. There's an enormous yard here. There's some of the other issues in District 30 and 24 are further north in Corona. I know that the Chancellor's working on that. But people forgot how overcrowded Ridgewood was. So I'm very proud to tell you we have really taken the pressure off, at least in this part, with the construction of the 2 new buildings, both of which have nice space, gym space, or the Learners and Leaders has like a multi-purpose room. It's a pre-K. But it's made a big difference. And so this school is not as overcrowded as it was for the last 50 years. So it's making a big difference. And so...
I just want to say something in terms
Come on over, guys, so they can get you.
Yeah.
I'm thinking particularly of the Geraldine Ferraro School. The multi-purpose rooms are different. If they've been developed that way, they tend to be more regulation size auditoriums, because the one you saw upstairs was makeshift multi-purpose, which means it was never really meant to be an auditorium or a gym. But if it's built originally to do both, the ceilings are higher, the courts are wider, and also when we're looking to do space issues, it's always about incubation. Where do you put the kids while you're removing the TCUs to put in? So we've done that throughout all of District 24 and 30, and District 20 in Brooklyn as well. Those are the 3 most overcrowded districts in the city.
Right. But it's taken years, years of planning. I mean, years of satisfying.
Sure. Right, and specifically, as the Assembly member talked about, in the areas like Corona of District 24, we've been building additions all over the place, and including full-size gyms within those spaces as well. So.
I know earlier this school year, a school in Corona, the playground was torn down to put trailers for UPK, and there's a plan to put a pre-K center in Fleshy Meadows Corona Park, which gets into the park alienation. I mean, is it sort of a game of just finding space wherever, even if it's at the cost of playground space? I mean, what takes the priority there?
In that case, those are strictly temporary and 1 or 2 years at most. And that was because I believe that the registration for pre-K, UPK, was enormous, well over what was anticipated. So we wanted to find space for all those children. But we're working on several other alternatives for that.
And I think, look, I want to give a lot of credit to the School Construction Authority. They constantly have found new ways to build. And sometimes it means finding, a building that we didn't have before, like a former Catholic school, or that we buy a private building. Sometimes it is taking advantage of development in a neighborhood to include a school in something being built. We're also looking at public buildings. There are some public buildings, like some libraries, for example, that are very, very low, where you could put something on top of them. So all of this continues, but School Construction Authority has been going nonstop, and bluntly, 10, 20 years ago, it was not an efficient, effective agency. Under Lorraine's leadership, it's an extraordinary agency that builds things really, really fast. And therefore, her reward is I asked her to build a lot more things. So now she got build a whole lot more capacity in general, and then do pre-K, and then we said now do 3K, and now go and get air conditioning in all the schools, and now do gyms for all the schools. But they're up to it. So long as we give them the resources, there's no question they have the ability to get it done. Yes?
Several speakers talked about mayoral control. We know that there's a deadline coming up, and there's been a lot of press coverage about how John Flanagan is asking your administration for a bunch of data. Doesn't seem to be satisfied with what he's getting. What is he asking you for? Is this an excessive request, and do you think that they should just act?
We believe fundamentally we responded to that request. I think there were some differences over format, but not actually over the information. We got them the information they wanted, and we tried very hard to make sure it was in the format they wanted. The bottom line was he was asking for school-by-school budgeting information. We provided that before Memorial Day. We're happy to answer any and all questions about it. It's totally transparent. We put it up online as well. So I think that issue has been resolved. They have the information they asked for. And we just want to move forward now and get to work with all the kinds of things we're talking about here that require a continuation of mayoral control. You'll see for yourself, Rich.
Mr. Mayor, what was your favorite part of gym?
You know what I remember, Rich? Was throwing the football through the tire. Remember that? Right? And it was very interesting. In our day, it was like the presidential fitness. It was JFK, right? And did JFK start it? So I don't know what happens nowadays. I don't get the sense it has the same prominence. But in our day, it was a really big deal to throw that football through the tire and try and win that award in your school. So that was cool. But I also remember, Rich, a lot of sitting around. And what Carmen was saying, a lot of things that really weren't exercise. It seemed to me when I was a kid, it was like this ritualistic thing. You went and did a little bit of exercise and you sat around a whole lot. And there was once in a while a competition that was fun, but mainly it was boring. And I don't remember ever looking forward to it, even though I love sports, because it didn't feel like it was really, competitive or fun or anything like that.
Did you get any pressure to play basketball?
I did. Rich, it was a painful time. There's a lot of people wanting me to play basketball, and I got close to doing it. But baseball was my true love, and I wasn't good enough to make the team probably. But I was focused on my academics. But then later in life, I learned I should have played basketball because Patrick Ewing came to my high school 2 years after I started high school, Cambridge Rindge and Latin. And I think if I had known that earlier, I would have focused my life on basketball because the team won the state championship a few years. So that would have been fun to be part of. Other questions on this? Yes.
Mr. Mayor, this program, the gym expansion was announced as part of the capital budget that was part of the handshake agreement on Friday, but we still haven't been able to get a total for what that's going to cost. And I guess I'm just curious, how do you come to an agreement without knowing what the total cost is going to be?
Well, the work has been going on some very clear assumptions with the City Council that we had the capital plan we put forward at the time of the preliminary and the exec. We all know that every year the council makes a series of additions. We're in the traditional range for that series of additions. There were a couple other things that we decided we wanted to focus on since the exec, but they're all consistent with past patterns. So everyone understands between the council and the administration the range we're working in, and the final details are being nailed down, and then the vote will come this week.
So I just want to clarify, I think from what Chancellor Fariña said before, this, you wouldn't be revamping or changing the newer, like, combination gym cafeterias that have been built in some schools, right, if they were built to the standards of a gym? I just want to try to clarify.
Liz will speak to that.
Yeah. So you're correct. If a school has something that was designed to be a gym and also has a stage so that it serves both purposes, those will remain. And as we assess all of the buildings, and if there's a location where there may not be space to add a gym, or there may not be a nearby gymnasium that's available for use for that school, we will be looking at, is there a space that we can make do both purposes, but do it in a much better way than what we saw upstairs. There may be occasions where we need to look at space and say, can we create a designed dance room or other designed physical education space? So every school will have designed designated PE.
And Mayor, just, you said at the outset of this today that this is personal for you. Obviously, you hit the gym yourself frequently, including I see this morning from Twitter. So you spoke about how it's necessary for people's, for their mental health and for their education and everything. Do you think that going to the gym every day helps you be a better mayor?
Yeah, but let me start by saying what focused me on this was my experience with my own children. And this is one of the things that, despite Ernie's relentless lobbying, generally speaking, this was not a front page kind of issue. And it was something very personal to me because I saw what my own children went through. I saw the fact that there were kids who just weren't getting this opportunity. It was really angering me, honestly. And I kept talking about it in the budget meetings, waiting for a day where we actually could put the resources together to do it and could do a plan. As you heard, 2 years ago, we started trying to figure out what it would take. And I think 2 years ago, the assumption was it was kind of Herculean to fix this problem that had been there for over a half century. But the more we looked at the kinds of solutions we could put into play, the more confident we were there was a way. It was about finding the resources, and we finally got to the point where we could devote the resources. So to me, it was seeing what worked and didn't work with my own kids and thinking it was unfair that a lot of kids were not having that opportunity that moved me here. For me personally, I would also say, I think anyone, especially a decision maker, needs physical activity to keep themselves focused and balanced. I think it's really important for anyone doing serious work. I would encourage anyone in any field. If they're not getting physical activity, I think it's undermining their ability to do all they have to do. Please.
Anecdotally, when I became a superintendent, actually, along with my school board, one of the things we looked at is middle school attendance. And what we changed, the only thing we changed like year 1 and 2, was to put phys ed first period in the morning in all our middle schools that were not having high attendance. And within a couple of months, that turned totally around. When I became a school principal of an elementary school, we took all our kids who were not having good attendance, and we put an 8 o'clock in the morning track team. And you had to be invited to join the track team. And the invitation, nobody knew how we picked the kids, but we picked the kids in the bottom quartile of attendance. And the attendance of those kids zoomed up within a matter of weeks. So this is not just about phys ed, it's about kids with allergies. It's also about what are the exciting things that bring kids to school? And phys ed and the arts are some of those things. So putting them in the school and putting them at the right time of day really makes a big difference. So anecdotally, as well as with statistics, I can tell you that this is really something that's very important for our schools.
Just one friendly amendment to Carmen's point. Phys ed done the right way gets kids to want to go to schools. Phys ed that I experienced would never have been a reason to go to school. But if something's exciting, if kids get to experience sports that they're into and feel that their physical abilities are improving, that's what excites them. Yes?
Speaking of the gym, there's been some criticism of you traveling 12 miles.
I'm going to see if there's anything else on education, and I'll come back to the gym. You'll be first. Anything else on this announcement or on education issues, particularly while we have Ernie and Cathy here? Yes.
I think I'm just kind of looking at these statistics now, but has gym class compliance been going up under the state law in recent years? And what's been pushing that up before we get to this issue of building new gyms?
One of the many reasons why I sing Chancellor Fariña's praises is because under her leadership, that number has gone up. The state is putting, I want to say, Speaker Hasty and the Assembly majority, this is a #1 priority for us. We put a number of years ago hundreds of millions of dollars into that Smart Schools Bond Act to do trailer removal and other things. There's connectivity issues too, but to try to keep the emphasis on building and dealing with this problem. And I'm just personally, it's been the major issue of my chairmanship of this committee in Albany all this time. Because it's not limited to the city, but it's most problematic in the city. So Carmen has done a great job in hiring, and mayoral control generally started to hire actual phys ed teachers, like my son's elementary school near the end of his tenure, but they did finally get an actual phys ed teacher as opposed to somebody who didn't know what they were doing. So, there's been a much more compliance, and we put a study in one of the budgets, I guess 2-3 years ago, to ask the city to evaluate, and they did, and it showed that where they need to improve, but they finally really have tackled it. And I want to say about Mayor de Blasio, I think we did, I didn't know you well when you were the public advocate, but I have some recollection of you and I doing an event about the need for phys ed, because I didn't have Nicholas in the school system, but your kids are a little older. And, it was very frustrating over a very long period of time for people. So there is a definite difference and a positive difference, and the city deserves and Carmen deserves great support and commendation, and Lorraine and the whole team have made such a big difference. I'm telling you honestly, there are 2 new schools in Ridgewood, the first schools built in 80 years. 80 years, nothing was done. So now we have 2 schools with gymatoriums, beautiful facilities, and now we're going to have a beautiful facility here. And that's making a big difference.
So I know that the plan calls for all schools to have designated PE space by 2021. Do you anticipate, in turn, providing all students with the required state level of phys ed at the same time?
Yeah. This is literally, besides everyone, look, you can hear there's a lot of personal commitment here. We all believe this was a wrong that needed to be righted a long time ago. But on top of that, it's the law. It's this amazing thing. I mean, this law was passed again in 1957 and then ignored for over 50 years. Not even close. We still have 200 more schools that we have to bring into compliance with the law. But finally, there is a plan and the resources to do that. When we get to September 2021, every school will be in compliance with the law. Melissa.
A question for Cathy Nolan. Can you just give us a sense of how you think the mayoral control issue will play out this year? Will the fact that it's an election year in New York City magnify the politics or maybe grandstanding around this issue? And how long do you think the mayor will end up with at the end of the
Well, obviously, the Assembly majority has put a variety of we originally wanted the same 7 that Mayor Bloomberg got. We've tried to be aware that the Senate, I believe vindictively, does not want to treat our schools the way they treat the schools in the districts they represent. It's very unfortunate, but I still think in the end we'll have mayoral control. If it has to be a shorter time period, in the end, Mayor de Blasio, Carmen, and the team have demonstrated the improvements that have happened under mayoral control. So I really don't believe, I do have respect for Senator Flanagan, and I have a long relationship with Senator Marcellino, who taught in this district for many years. Senator Marcellino was my teacher in high school. So he's well aware of the overcrowding when he was at Grover Cleveland. So I really believe that the Senate Republicans in the end will vote to extend mayoral control. It may not be as long as we would like, but in the end the mayor keeps giving them the information that they want and keeps explaining why it's working. And I think Speaker Hasty has made it very clear it's a #1 priority for our majority. So I'm always optimistic. All right.
Anything else? Go ahead.
Yeah, a question for the Chancellor. The Mayor has previously said that the DOE is reviewing the process by which Richard Bury got one of his children into school, and I just wanted to check in with you on where that review stands.
I will just start, and the Chancellor is more than welcome to come up. That review continues, and we'll be happy to tell you what we get when that review completes. But again, I'm very comfortable nothing was done wrong, and I'm very comfortable that in the process of recruiting someone who has done an outstanding job from another county to come here and dislocate his family, he had every right to understand what his options would be, and I think the process was handled properly. But that review will continue, and then we'll have results. See if there's anything else in education. Last call. Okay, let's let these guys go out.
Thank you. I don't want to get you another phone. Never make it all. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Very well. Congratulations. Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
Speaking of the gym,
Segue.
there's been a lot of criticism of you traveling 12 miles from Gracie Mansion to Park Slope. There's been criticism for years, but this has been inflamed once again, considering you're saying people should change their habits to combat climate change. So why won't you change your habits? Is it in any way hypocritical? And is the Park Slope what does it offer you that other gyms on the Upper East Side?
Look, I'm just going to make this simple. We all have to do what we can do, and I'm very focused on recycling in my life and composting. I try not to take plastic bags when I go to the store. There's all sorts of things I do in my own life to contribute. This is something that's very personally important to me as part of how I do my job as best I can. I'm going to keep doing it. The vehicles are going one way or another. I think that's what is different than a typical person's life. For security reasons alone, those vehicles are going to make that trip one way or another, even if I were to take a subway, let alone the time the subway would take. So I have to use my time effectively, but I try in many ways in my personal life to continue to contribute to a better environment. And, as I said the other day, much more importantly, is the things we are doing as a city. This city is going to retrofit all our public buildings and mandate all our private buildings to retrofit. This city is going to an all-electric car fleet. This city is going to use renewables more than it's ever been done before. This city is going to now, as you heard, because of the executive order, by September 30th, we're going to look to both increase and speed up our emissions reduction goals to meet the goal of a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase in global temperature. Compared to the 2-degree standard we're meeting now. All of that is what's really going to change things. And that's what we're going to produce in this administration. Yes?
Excuse me. On your jobs plan, so the budget was, you did the handshake on Friday. The elements of the jobs plan are not in that budget yet. You announced it in February, so when are we going to get the details of how much that plan is going to cost?
Yeah, there are pieces of the plan that are in the budget. And we can get you a delineation. The plan, I saw a draft still being perfected, but it should be quite soon, I think a matter of weeks. And then anything else that is needed that's not already in the budget, we would have the opportunity as early as November to do something through the budget modification. But remember, that's a multi-year plan. So we also have opportunities to update it in future budgets.
My question is, so this is something that you articulated in your state of the city. This is an election year. You're now saying we really won't have details until the November update, which will be after.
No, I said the plan will be out in a matter of weeks. There are elements of the plan in the budget already. As you remember, we announced some pieces along the way, and those are already in the budget.
Do you have a sense of what the top line number is going to be for the jobs plan?
We could put it together, but the goal I feel very confident of. The jobs goal.
Separately, there was an American Ballet Theater dancer who jumped into the subway tracks to rescue a homeless man who had been pushed there. Are you aware of this situation? What was your reaction to it?
I'm not aware of the details. I commend that dancer for doing that, but I'm not aware of the details. Okay, yes.
Mr. Mayor, you're talking about what the city is doing to combat climate change. However, there's been a lot of construction in waterfront areas that are prone to flooding, especially with sea level rise, a place like Long Island City. I wonder what the city's planning is, if the city has considered this at all.
Yes.
It seems like there really isn't planning.
No, look, excellent question, because this is like the future of New York City, right? How are we going to do this in one of the world's great coastal cities and one that's growing in population? So this is something I feel very strongly about, and I think that Mayor Bloomberg felt the same way. We're not going to turn away from the water. We're not going to, retreat inland. We have to figure a way to make it work with our basic contours. Well, first of all, we're building all the buildings going forward near the water differently. You know, they used to put the most sensitive things in the basement, and that's where everything flooded. That's not happening under new building codes and approaches. The sensitive mechanicals are being elevated. A lot of times a building will simply be built higher than it would have off the ground for its first floor, things like that. So part of it is we're changing how we build. The second is there's a $20 billion resiliency effort underway that's already reached a number of parts of the city and has improved resiliency. It's going to play out over years. But we're going to keep working to improve resiliency along the waterfront all over the city. So I'm confident we can do both. I think if we had not changed our building code, we'd be in a lot of trouble. But the fact that we have changed our strategy and approach, and the whole development world knows that, I think is going to allow us to keep being a strong coastal city. Yes.
Do you think that New York City and the state can fix the congestion problem that we have right now without building a lot more subway lines? Is that possible? Is it possible to address the congestion without more subways? And if not, where's that money going to come from?
Another great question. I would say this is going to happen in phases over years, how we address the problem. So as we've gotten a real object lesson with the 2nd Avenue subway, you could say you want to build a new subway and then come back in a decade or two to see it in many cases. We need to first think about the things we can do right now. So what are right now things? Ferry service, obviously off to a strong start, and something we could expand greatly if it's working. Select bus service, which we've been doing with the MTA, has been very, very productive. And there's lots of places where that can be expanded. It takes some physical investments, but it's obviously working with existing roads. So it's a lot quicker than doing something like building, an underground subway. Even light rail, we're excited to see what can happen with the BQX, because if light rail proves to be a strong option, that's also substantially easier to build than a subway. I think it's fair to say over time, will we have to build more subways in New York City? I think that's a real possibility, but we have to emphasize the point over time. It's not an immediate solution to the problem.
Is that something that you envision, if you're reelected, that you would begin working on?
Yes. Yes. As I said, the city made a $2.5 billion investment to the MTA, and we were very clear in doing that we want to have a say in how that's going to be used, and that process is ongoing. But beyond that, there's a question of where we need to be 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, 25 years from now. Obviously, if the people choose me, I'm going to be spending real time in a second term trying to figure out our physical reality for the future. The things we've done right now were the things that we could do right now, right? I mean, the ferry, as you've seen with your eyes, that went from idea to execution in less than 2 years. Those are things that are going to have a big impact for people's lives right now. But what we can do to make sense of the long term, that's something the entire community is going to have to work on. It's not just an MTA thing. It's everyone. It's the business community. It's the civic community. Everyone's going to have to be a part of figuring out a long-term vision, and that's something I certainly want to work on if I have a second term.
Just relatedly, do you think that it's possible for the city to grow at the clip that it has been growing, or even grow at all if congestion stays the way that it is and if we don't have new subway?
Yes, I do, because, again, I think we've already proven there are other options that are real and available right now. Where the growth is happening, first and foremost, happens to be near where we've put the ferries, right? A lot of that growth is on the East River waterfront in Brooklyn and Queens. That's where we've hyper-focused the ferry activity. That would also benefit from the light rail. So I do believe we can strike that balance. And again, select bus service gets the least attention, but is a real workhorse. It really covers, thousands, tens of thousands of people benefit from it. So there's a lot we can do, and I believe we can strike that balance. But I think it's a great question. Where can we go in the future in terms of subway development? I think it's something we have to make sense of. But we do know it's a long-term prospect. It's not something that relieves our immediate problem. Let me do 1 and 2. Go ahead.
So last week, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke and Bill de Blasio sent you a letter asking you to reconsider the use of the broken windows policing method and current summons practices, and they spoke about how broken windows can lead to some undocumented immigrants getting deported and just the overall impact of these policies on communities of color. Have you seen the letter, and is it something that you're considering reviewing? I
have not seen the letter. I certainly look forward to seeing it. There are two people I respect a lot. That being said, my view on this matter has been stated and restated and restated. Quality of life policing works. It should be applied fairly and consistently across all communities. It is based on citizen complaints to 311, and we have to be responsive to our people. But what we're doing now, obviously, since we're retraining, we have retrained the entire police force and will continue, is providing officers with a lot of discretion in terms of how they approach it, including options like summonses and even just warnings. But the quality of life offenses have very little bearing on anyone who happens to be undocumented, because they can result in just a warning, they can result in a summons. They don't result in an arrest in the vast majority of cases unless there's a more serious matter, or in some cases like fare evasion, a pattern of consistent negative behavior. So I understand the question, but I think it doesn't align to the facts on the ground. We need to continue quality of life policing. There's other things that we need to do to support undocumented immigrants, but that's not the way to do it. Go ahead.
Your comment on the announcement of Act of America of coordinating a series of protests across the nation, including New York City, on June 10th, and this is in Ramadan, under the name of March Against Sharia.
I heard, I didn't get the last part. You said protests around the country, and said the last part?
And this is in Ramadan. This is now we are in the holy
Right.
month. Yes, and this is a name against a march against the Sharia.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the details. I can only make a broad comment. This is a city that respects all communities and respects all faiths, and that is part of the success of New York City. When we have done more to work more closely with our Muslim communities, it's been for the betterment of all. When we announced the Eid holidays for our public schools, that was something that was inclusive and respectful of Muslim communities. I think that's where the city needs to go, and that's where the country needs to go. Instead of creating false division, focus on what unifies us, and Muslim New Yorkers are looking for every opportunity to contribute to this city. This administration believes that we have to always be open and respectful. Marcia.
Sir, two questions. The first one, there's a new congestion pricing proposal. I wonder how you feel about it, and if the City Council passes it, will you sign it?
I'm very clear. The only way congestion pricing can even be considered is through Albany. That's what has been determined by the law department long ago, and that's not going to happen at this point in time. So there are some things where I argue that something can change in Albany. I can tell you very squarely there's not going to be any consideration of congestion pricing so long as the current political alignment in Albany exists. That is a hard reality. So I'm not putting time and energy into something that's not going to happen.
As a follow-up question, your Transportation Commissioner testified about the broader area of congestion in New York City at the City Council today. And one of the things that she suggested was that to relieve congestion, you need to do more ticketing. And I wonder how you feel about more ticketing and some of the areas that she talked about, double parking, people who block the box, things like that as a way to solve what's going on in the street.
I can tell you, I think as a former driver, and to be a driver again one day, but also as a pedestrian, blocking the box is horrible, and it is avoidable. I mean, I've been at that moment of decision where you decide if you want to take the greedy option and try and, jump ahead, or stay chill and just recognize the light's about to turn red, and the smart thing to do for everyone is let it go. That's a personal choice. If you make the wrong choice, you should pay a penalty for that, because then you mess up everyone else's life. And in the past, when the city did major campaigns against blocking the box, it had a real big impact on behavior, just like Vision Zero has had a big impact on behavior. So yes, I agree with that. I also think there are people who, double park in a very abusive manner that messes up the whole street for everyone else. And there should be enforcement of that.
So you think more ticketing could be a solution to making the streets traffic flow?
Ticketing that is about keeping the flow of traffic. I keep telling people, and I understand there's cynicism about ticketing. I don't want to ticket someone who's letting their kid out of the car to go into school and is there for 30 seconds. I want to ticket those who are blocking traffic on a prolonged basis and there's another way they can do it and are being greedy about it. I want to ticket people who block the box and, of course, had another option but to block the box. Just like I want to ticket folks who speed near a school or fail to yield to pedestrians. If that's what it takes to change behavior, then that's what we're going to do. Go ahead, Juliette.
Yeah, on congestion, but different area. Yesterday, there were more than the usual street closings in the perimeter of the Israeli Day
Yes.
Parade. And I'm wondering, is that in reaction to London, or is that going to be the new norm for parades, security?
That is the new norm for certain parades. There are some that are bigger, there are some that are smaller. There are some that are more sensitive than others. I think the simple rule of thumb will be if it is a large parade, like Thanksgiving Parade, St. Patrick's Parade, or if it is a strategically sensitive parade, like the Salute to Israel Parade, we will not be allowing traffic to cross those parades any longer. So that's a decision I've made with the NYPD that is about safety and security. In light of some of the changes we've seen in terrorist tactics around the world, it's the sensible thing to do. We have some smaller parades where that may not be necessary, but for those, again, that are large or sensitive, that will be the norm for the foreseeable future.
And any crossing, so nobody will be able to cross anywhere in the area?
Pedestrians can cross, but not vehicles.
Any area of the parade?
Again, there may always be some specific variations, and the NYPD will make the decision case by case if there are to be any specific variations. But if you're talking about a template, what's going to be, again, the norm, we're not going to have traffic crossing parades. It's not safe given what we've seen of terrorist tactics in recent years. Rich?
Just
We'll do a few more.
follow on
Go
that,
ahead.
how many parades are in that category? Can you tell us?
Well, right now, that was true for the Thanksgiving Parade, the Macy's Parade. That was true for St. Patrick's. That was true for Salute to Israel. So again, I don't think it's most, because we have a lot of smaller parades, obviously. It is the ones that are highest profile would be the simplest way to say it. We can get you a specific number. But again, NYPD is also going to reserve its rights. If it sees a situation that it comes to the conclusion that we can change those rules, we might do that. Or even with a smaller parade, we might apply it. But I think, again, high profile would be maybe a good summary term. A high profile parade, that's how we're going to approach it.
Quick questions. How's the officer doing that was dragged, as far as what you know? And also, I know you tweeted in support of London.
Yes.
Anything you'd like to add to that today?
Yeah, first on our officer, it's a tough situation. I'm still holding out hope, and everyone's prayers should be with the officer and his family, but it's very tough. We'll be seeing a number of you later when we talk about police matters and have more specifics, but it's, he was grievously injured, and he's been fighting for his life, and it's a tough situation. On London, I yesterday was trying to keep the focus on the sober matters at hand. I will say this now. I'm astounded that President Trump attacked the mayor of one of the most important cities in the world, who is doing an extraordinary job supporting his people in a time of pain and reminding people to be strong and resilient. That's what Mayor Khan was saying. You will see, I mean, look at his words. You will see more police presence. Don't be alarmed by that. Recognize that's part of how we're protecting you. He was saying exactly what a leader should say. And to have the President of the United States attack him was absolutely unacceptable and not helping anyone be safer. Look, on top of that, Mayor Sadiq Khan is a very positive example to the Western world of someone who came from the Muslim community and has become a leader of all communities. And he's a very positive example to peace-loving Muslims and Muslims who believe in democracy all over the world. He should be supported, not attacked. And I know him personally and like him very much. I found it an affront to someone who was trying to do the right thing for his people. Please.
Just, and this is not intended as like a gotcha or anything. I am genuinely curious, and I think a lot of other people are. If you can tell us what you think of Oscar Lopez Rivera, can you explain more clearly why you don't think that he is a terrorist, or what you think of the FALN? Yeah. Was what they did violence in the service of nationalism? Is that okay?
So let me speak to something. First of all, I had made my views known to the parade committee. You guys had asked me different questions. I had been diplomatic, let's say, in the answering of those questions, because I believe the parade committee was seriously trying to grapple with the issue, and I wanted to give them some space to do it. I'm very happy that Mr. Lopez Rivera has declined the honor. I don't think it should have been offered to him. I think it's good that he declined it, because it was entirely distracting from the issue at hand, which is Puerto Rico. I mean, this is one of these things where you watch and recognize that the most important thing is getting lost. 3.5 million people are being mistreated by their own government right now, by the U.S. government. These are Americans. Their health system's falling apart. They have a Zika crisis. Their economy's falling apart. 3.5 million people who we are very tied to as New Yorkers. And really nothing's being done to address it. That's the only thing this parade should have been about. And the decision to honor him, even though it was in the context of many other people, and I don't think that was fair to the parade committee. There was 10 or 20 people being honored. He was not the Grand Marshal. He was not the sole honoree. It just took away from what the whole thing was supposed to be about. So I'm glad that that has now been put aside, so we can now, I hope, spend this week talking about the plight of Puerto Rico and the changes that have to be made. On the bigger question, no, that movement was mistaken from the beginning, because it used violence in the context of a democratic society. And that is not acceptable to me. It doesn't conform with anything I believe. When you have a democratic society, you use political, peaceful means to bring about change. There are undemocratic societies. I was just watching a film about Nelson Mandela last night and what the ANC had to do when there was apartheid and they were not allowed to even be a political party. We're not talking about that here in the case of Puerto Rico. We're talking about a part of our nation that I don't think has been treated fairly, but did have a democratic process that they were a part of. So no, violence is not acceptable. His sentence was commuted by not one but 2 United States presidents and 2 Justice Departments. I think that's a very important part of this equation. But in the end, no, of course I don't agree with what he did, and I don't think he should be the issue any longer. I think the issue should be Puerto Rico and the plight of Puerto Rico and the people of Puerto Rico. Yes,
Mayor, did you, just following up on this topic, you said you made your views known to the parade committee. Did you urge them to rescind the honor, or did you try to go through them to urge Mr. Lopez Rivera to rescind?
I've just made very clear that what was happening was not right. It wasn't working. In any sense. I didn't think it was a smart idea to begin with, but more importantly, it was taking away from the whole thing they were supposed to be focused on. And I think, I don't want to speak for them, I think their intentions were to focus on someone who had been supported by a lot of Puerto Ricans for the commutation of his sentence. Just that. Even people didn't agree with him politically. He wanted independence. A lot of people didn't want independence. But they still thought he had been in jail a long time. He was a Vietnam War veteran. He had served his time, and the President of the United States was willing to say it's time to commute the sentence. And a lot of Puerto Ricans of different backgrounds thought that was a fair thing. I think the parade committee thought that would be the sort of governing reality. It clearly wasn't, and it wasn't going to be. And so to get the topic back to Puerto Rico, that issue had to be resolved. It's not for me to dictate to them how to do it. I just made clear to them that what was going on wasn't going to work and had to be changed in the back.
Mayor, could you give us an update on how the search for a new correction commissioner is going?
It's going well. We expect to be able to name someone in give or take a month. So basically, as Commissioner Pont is leaving, we should have someone in place either by the time he leaves or very shortly thereafter. But we've seen some strong candidates. And in the meantime, all the reforms that we have in place are going to continue. Melissa.
The change in him not accepting the honor, Oscar Lopez Rivera, solve the problem, or is it still a bit late, given that some people like the police commissioner, Governor Cuomo, don't seem convinced to rejoin the parade?
Everyone has to make their own decision. I respect whatever decision people make. But the problem's been solved. He's no longer officially associated with the parade. And the parade is about the Puerto Rican people. So everyone will make their own decision, but I would urge anyone as they're looking at it to think about, we need to focus on Puerto Rico. It is a crisis. It's a huge crisis. It has real ramifications for this city and this country. We shouldn't be talking about this guy anymore. He's no longer a part of the discussion as far as I'm concerned. It should all be about Puerto Rico. Yeah.
Did you at any point, Mr. Mayor, tell the committee that if this didn't happen, if he didn't rescind the honor, that you would march?
I made clear to them that I was uncomfortable with the situation, and I wanted them to resolve it. I really believed they could resolve it. But if it wasn't resolved, I wasn't going to be comfortable being a part of it.
And just continuing on that, because publicly you never expressed that sentiment until your office kind of made that clear.
That's as I said earlier, because sometimes to get something done, you hold your tongue in public. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Kevin.
Well, luckily he has a second.